Hey everybody, Keith Dotson here, and we're in the small mountain town of Jellico, which has a unique distinction. It sits on the border of two states, part of it in Tennessee and part of it in Kentucky. And while I visit a lot of small towns that have seen better days, and that's certainly the case here, this one is a little bit personal because I used to live here and I was born not too far from here. And this is my parents' hometown. I haven't been back here very many times since I was a very young boy, and it always feels a little strange being back here, like a memory from another lifetime. Jellico is, or at least was, a coal mining town. I have memories of my grandfather coming home from the mines covered in black dust from head to toe. My dad opted out of the coal business and joined the army instead, so we moved away when I was very young, and we moved a lot when I was very young, which is how I got the wanderlust that still consumes me to this very day. The name Jellico probably comes from the angelica plants that grow in the mountains around here, although many theories for the source of the name abound. It may have also come from the Tellico land grants that were nearby. That's Tellico with a T, an old Cherokee word. Jellico has seen better days for sure. My dad, who's 84, remembers when it was a hopping town. That would have been in the 1950s and early 1960s. Today, there's a lot of poverty and there's said to be a lot of drug use in the community. Poverty's nothing new in Appalachia, though. Photographer Lewis Hine came to Jellico to shoot children doing dangerous and dirty work in the coal industry in the early 1900s. It was a seminal work that helped the nation get child labor laws enacted. There's also a lot of pride and a lot of history here, which I'll talk about. I see these old storefronts, some of which are occupied and some of which are vacant, and I think of places like Union Level or Pamplin City where the emptiness has overtaken the town and left it a shell of its former self. This place, Mary's Kitchen, was a cafe since I was a small boy. I remember it as an ongoing business, and that would have been in the early 1970s. My mother worked as a hairdresser in one of these neighboring shops. The sign above says the music store. It was a shop that may have been owned by a once famous fellow named Homer Roadheaver, and I have no idea if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but Mr. Roadheaver was a musician, a music director, a music publisher. He composed gospel music, and he was an early recorder of religious music, and he was an evangelist. He had a Jellico connection, and I imagine this was part of his music publishing business that started around 1910. Interestingly, next door is a shop that seems to have been a photography studio, but in researching Roadheaver, I learned that he also had some dealings with photography or photographic prints. It's a little unclear what the connection was, but I think this could have been part of his business too. The signs are hard to make out, but on the far left it says Kodak and Studio. Another panel says Commercial Work, Interior and Exterior Work, and the far right panel says Frames to Order. This is the public library. This building, with 6 windows, was the J.J. Newberry store. Locals called it Newberry's. That Rexall sign has been in place since at least the 1940s, maybe earlier. You can see it online in old postcards and historic photographs. It was called Central Drug, but while the sign has been saved, there's not a drugstore there anymore. There's quite a famous event that happened in Jellico in 1906. On September 21st of that year, a major industrial accident affected the entire town. The New York Times headline read, quote, 12 killed by dynamite. Car of 20,000 pounds explodes in heart of Jellico, 10. End quote. It went on to say, quote, Jellico 10, September 21st. 12 deaths, the injuring of scores of other persons, and $500,000 damage to property were caused here today when a carload of dynamite standing on a track near the Southern Railway Station exploded with a report that was heard for 20 miles. End quote. Dynamite destined for the coal mines blasted much of downtown into a pile of blackened matchsticks. The event still looms large in the collective memory of the town and in its lore. There are sites online claiming that these buildings were damaged by the 1906 explosion, but my dad remembers these buildings in full operation when he was a young man in the 1950s. One of them was a grocery store, in fact. 2 of them were Masonic lodges at some point in the past. They're in ruins now, but not from the dynamite blast of 1906. That one says Boston Lodge F&AM 593. That would be free and accepted Masons. And this one says Hillside Lodge number 51, KP. KP would have been Knights of Pythias. At some point, the city leadership will no doubt determine that these are too great a safety hazard to keep standing, and another visual reminder of the town will be lost. Okay, y'all, to close out the video, we'll visit some relatives of mine who have a few interesting artifacts to show, and that'll be followed by a selection of my black and white photographs that I shot on this trip. Thanks for watching.